been such an unbelievably inspirational couple of days. The personal stories that we've heard, and I know that it's not always easy to share for the first time. People have been incredibly touched and moved on a personal note by a lot of things that were said. And so we just thought it would be wonderful, because each and every one of you is so powerful. You've all got brilliant personal stories, and also how you bring that passion, this passion for diversity, inclusion, belonging, equity, brings all of us together, no matter what level, no matter where we're from. And we just thought it'd be a really nice thing to do, because we've managed to speak to some of you, not all of you, and actually all of your voices matter. So we'd just love to do a little roving mic. If anyone wants to say anything, great. We'd love to hear from you, where you work, why you're passionate about diversity and inclusion. And if you don't want to say anything, that's also fine. We just wanted to open the floor, because actually this is about all of us as opposed to just a few of us. But without further ado, I'm introducing a very dear friend of mine, actually, Kevin Dunkley. He's the Chief Sustainability Officer at an organisation called HH Global. HH are forward-thinking, innovative when it comes to supply chain diversity, and really what supplier diversity means. Actually, this is something that affects every one of us. Diverse spends, the communities, the customers that we serve as large blue chip organisations, or even smaller organisations. Where are we putting those purpose-led pounds in order to actually affect positive change, wealth creation back into the community? And so we're going to hear from Kevin. We'd love you all to be thinking about questions as well. We're going to hear from Kevin about not only his journey, about how he came to be where he is today, because Kevin, you've been a beacon of inspiration for me on a personal note. I remember we met on a UN Sustainable Development Goals networking piece, and actually you sharing your personal story, as well as you sharing about why those SDGs, or the UN Sustainable Development Goals, rather, I should say, in case anyone doesn't know what they are, and how that interlinks in ESG and the societal aspects of diversity was so important. And it was really that sparked not only a friendship, which is the wonderful thing about diversity and inclusion. It brings us together as friends, colleagues, partners, business colleagues, suppliers and such, but it really sparked an interest, and we've stayed in touch since. And so I'd love for you to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you, and also the role in HH and why and what supplier diversity really does mean.
Thanks, Layla. That's an embarrassing introduction, but yes, we are good friends. We met through that work, the UN thing, the UN goals, which I'll probably come back to a bit. But so I work for an organisation called HH Global, very privileged to lead the sustainability function, which includes, because there was a space where nobody was really doing anything, diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, and a bunch of other things, help our 4,500 staff understand why this kind of topic is important. And because of the kind of organisation we are, we have 8,500 suppliers. This is a key area of what we do. My background, I'm a techie. I used to be a creative, then I was a techie. I worked for a startup, son of an Irish immigrant and an orphan. I suppose weren't poor, but we did okay, but comprehensive in London. The bullying thing resonated with me from the lady from Britvic. Tough school, you know, mid to late 70s. It was a pretty nasty environment. Racist environment as well, I remember. So just an upbringing that lots of people probably can relate to. Got very fortunate to get into what was then the printing industry, which then turned into the technology industry, then the marketing industry, and now our business positions itself as a marketing outsourcing company. So what that means is big brands, some of you in the room, but people like Coca-Cola, Unilever, Google, Adidas, Nike, have big marketing campaigns. They need to run them across the world, across lots of countries. We're in lots of countries. We are the go-to. They come to us and say, we're rolling out new stores with Beyonce in the window and new trainers and new soaps and all these different products. We need to get it happening in 70 countries at once. They come to us and we make it happen. We don't make it happen. Our supply chain makes it happen. So that's why it's so important to us to have the supply chain is pivotal to our business model. I'm very lucky to have been charged with the sustainability role 7-8 years ago. Went into the woods with HSBC and realised the environment was really important, and that was what lit the bulb. And then we realised that there was more than just environmental sides to sustainability, there's the human side. So you'll hear people and planet is probably the best way to describe it. And profit. I think good organisations that do those two things right tend to make more money as well. So you can be a good business doing good business. So I'm passionate about it. I get paid for doing it. And I get to meet great people like Layla and her team as part of the working day. So our business, the supply chain is key, and there's been a bit of a need for a refresh about how suppliers are dealt with. And so that's what we're trying to bring about. And what I mean by that is the suppliers have always been told to do this and do that by this date for that cost. And that's still the case in a lot of conversations. What we need to change that to is, let's analyse where the client's money's going, which suppliers are getting it, in which regions, what's the demographic of the supplier, and shouldn't you be having some targets to try and change that? If it's all white male-owned businesses getting 100% of your budget, that's not a good thing. And so don't sit here and preach about what you're doing in your business if you're not walking the walk in your supply chain. So there's a lot of clients, a lot of big brands do it. Unilever, the P&Gs of this world, the Barclays of this world are really strong on this. But for every one of them, there's 10 that don't do anything. So we try and be a bit of a catalyst to go, you could put a KPI about diverse supply chain in this contract. Well, that's going to make it harder for you, isn't it? Well, that's what we want to be the accelerator for that. We want to help bring some change. And the more diverse your supply chain, the better your product. It's a win-win-win. So hopefully that sort of summarises me and the role. We're quite a big company now. We're British, privately owned British company with some investment from Blackstone, but our biggest market is North America. Second biggest is UK, but we're all over Asia, all over Latin America. So it's a really interesting role I'm privileged to have. I've got friends in Argentina, Tokyo, Canada, South Africa because of work. So that's pretty cool.
Mm-hmm. Well, Kevin, first and foremost, the personal story, absolutely amazing. That is social mobility down to a T, isn't it? You know, that is just absolutely wonderful. It proves that diversity, inclusion, belonging, equity is not just a surface level initiative. Actually, this goes far beyond the surface, and without asking those questions, we would never know. Now, I'm the adopted Chinese daughter of two white British parents. I'm proudly dyslexic, and actually it's hearing some of these stories and, knowing what is diversity on the outside, there's diversity on the inside as well. And actually, you sharing your story, makes me want to share my story, makes others want to share their stories. And that's really, a lot of what this is about. But moving into supply chain diversity, because that is just so incredibly impactful. The fact that, large organisations like, and Pfizer also, who is here as well, one of our proud partners, as well as the other titans of industry that you've mentioned, they have these huge spends and budgets, which are now starting to pivot towards organisations that care about societal, sustainable change. Talk to us a little bit about some of the almost like the case studies, the positive impacts that you've seen from some of the organisations that you're working with, because I think this is just, it's a really brilliant way to actually give back into the societies that we serve and give back to what can be underrepresented communities.
I mean, interestingly, this diverse supply chains and the notion of it grew up in North America. It's a very mature conversation there. Probably 10 years ago, with Johnson & Johnson was one of the clients that we worked with, when this clause appeared in the contract and said, 50% of the business we give you, and it was like $20-30 million, a significant amount of money. 50% of that needs to go what we classify as a diverse supplier, and it was like, oh, this is interesting. And they had a system to do it as well, so they could track whether 50% of the work was going there. And in the US, it tended to be categorisations like ex-veterans, ethnically minority-owned, women-owned, small businesses. Ironically, in the US, is categorised as 500 people or less, which I would contend is not a small business. But anyway, that's the way they categorise it there. And I think there were tax breaks for businesses who had a good posture on this and could report on this. So they're way ahead in their maturity in North America than we are, which isn't the case on every subject, but on that one they are. So that's where we kind of learn the ropes. And then we realised this is not so hard. It's our sourcing, our procurement or sourcing team who kind of manage that. We reported on it in quarterly business reviews and in all the usual KPIs. The client was really happy because we became a facilitator for that. So hats off to Johnson & Johnson or J&J for having the vision to do that back then, but also then finding the right kind of partners, because that's all part of winning the business, is being a facilitator of their program. So that's how it started in Europe now and in Asia, and unfortunately in Latin America. This is still a really new area. We've got some different challenges here because of GDPR and what you are and aren't allowed to ask an organisation and what an organisation will and won't answer. So what we're seeing is starting to happen in Europe is companies are defaulting to female-owned businesses. That's diverse. I mean, it is to a point, but that's the one that seems to be easier to measure, and people seem to be open about saying, yes, I'm a female-owned business, I'm a member of We Connect, and you can give me the work. The rest of it seems to still be sitting in the too hard to do box in Europe. I don't think our American friends are so shy. They tend to just go in and say what they say, don't they, over there? It's a little less regulated. But in Europe, we're finding it a struggle, and our clients are finding it a struggle. But what I think is interesting, if you boil it down, is if you've got 30 million or 50 million or however much your budget is, and you haven't set a percentage of that to go to a diverse community or an underserved group, you're missing a trick. And so we actually find ourselves, rather than now being asked by Johnson & Johnson to do this, we now suggest this to brands, and I'm not going to mention any, but there are some big brands who just haven't got this in the contract, and we'll say, you've missed something here. We should set a target of 5, 7, 9, just pick some numbers, because it's probably 0 at the minute. Let's try and just get 5% of the spend to go to a diverse community. Let's categorise or define what that is, and we will make it happen for you. You haven't got to do anything, you've just got to say yes. And that's work on us. So it almost feels like we're pulling rather than it being pushed, but this needs to happen quicker. And businesses like ours, and there's others, Communicis are in the network as well, and there's other businesses who have large supply chains, all have a responsibility to do this. It's not just about making money, it's about leaving a positive footprint from your business every day. So I think it's something we're pretty good on in North America. We've got work still to do in Europe, just because of the challenges I've just said. Our strategic sourcing team are really strong. It might be known as procurement in some of your businesses. Those guys are going on a journey as well, because traditionally they've been just brought up to be quite determined with the supplier on pricing, and that's been their main focus. I nearly said another phrase, but be quite rigorous with the supplier on price. This conversation changes that. You can't be the tough commercial, I'm not bully, but the tough commercial operator and then be also passionate, empathetic. They don't sit so well together, do they? So you're finding this can be a bit of a struggle for some hard-nosed procurement people. We need to change that.
And for all procurement people listening in, whether they're listening in on the hub, don't worry, we do really like you. But actually, it is... Sorry, I frogged my throat. I could see and hear people laughing, and I was thinking to myself, oh, I know one of those people as well.
They've got tremendous power, procurement.
Absolutely, and this is it, is how we're shifting now from empathetic-led leadership and putting money where it matters, because this is not, this initiative is not a nice to have. When people say, oh, it's lovely, all kind of floating off doing great, lovely things, actually, it is a strategic business initiative. It is a strategic business imperative. And for large organisations to switch out, I think you said 5% there, even if you're influencing spend by 5%, imagine the positive repercussion that can have all the way through the supply chain.
Now, one thing that the UK is doing well in the public sector, they have specific rules and it's quite regulated, and their procurement model now talks about social value, which includes diverse supply chain, local communities, employing people from underserved communities nearby to wherever the facility is. So that's starting to be written into contracts, which is really good to see. But that's, we're an outlier on that one, I think. Most of the rest of the world, it tends to come from the board level. If the board level of a J&J have trickled this down, then it comes down to the legal team and the procurement team, and it gets written in. And once you write things in contracts, magical things happen. And once you put a target against something, I mean, this is so cliche, but it's so true. Once you put a target out there, magical things happen. People come to you and say, if I do this, will that help towards our target? Yes. But if we didn't have the target, they wouldn't even have asked. So, and that goes for climate, social value, diverse supply chain. So get some targets out there if you haven't already got some, because it changes behaviour.
So you skipped ahead already to some of my... No, it's absolutely fine. I was just thinking... There's lots of data geeks. That's all in the audience, myself included. Well, actually, I'm looking at everyone like, oh, data, loves data. But what gets measured gets done. What gets measured gets managed, ultimately. So let's talk about ESG. How are we measuring the S within ESG, because we've all heard about this. It's now being talked about more at board level. It's being talked about, at investor level, investor relations, all these kind of places. The stakeholder map is starting to broaden rapidly. How do we measure and track the societal aspects of ESG, and is supply chain diversity another great way to be able to do that?
Yeah, I mean, it's part of the ESG, and how to measure it. You don't need to go and get a fancy system and spend thousands of dollars. Most people are doing it in spreadsheets to start with. So you'll have a list somewhere of your supply chain, you'll have a list of your colleagues. I mean, this isn't internal and external, but if we think just supply chain, your suppliers are listed somewhere on an internal system or a spreadsheet. You should know who owns the company. You should know whether they're financially sound. You should know their leadership position and their shareholding. That's all part of onboarding a supplier properly. So you just look at what you know, and if you don't know it all, then you should just send out a simple survey to your suppliers, framing it in a nice positive, we're trying to just get a better understanding of our supply chain partners. The word partner should be used sometimes, because they're just businesses. Suppliers sometimes can be a bit condescending, can't it? But they're businesses, and ask them the questions where it fills in the gap. So have you a diverse ownership? Are you doing anything in the local community? What initiatives are you doing that would be meaningful? And put that in either a spreadsheet or a system of some sort. And then you can see where you're starting from, because you can't measure it, like you just said. You don't know, you can't see progress. So that's your baseline, if you like. And so we've just done this for a UK client, big client, who we've got about 80 suppliers just for them. And they were looking at social enterprises, female-owned businesses, ethnically owned businesses. There was another category. I can't think what the fourth one was, but we didn't know all of the categories. So we just sent out a simple Microsoft form, couched it in a nice friendly email saying our client XYZ has asked to dive into this a bit more. There is no wrong and right, just be truthful about your business. And now we've got a baseline. So the next step is, okay, so we've got, I think it was about 8% female-owned businesses. We were very low on one of the measures and somewhere in the middle on another one. It was like, okay, what do we want that to look like? It's a 3 or 4 year engagement. So you say, well, there's where we are. Let's jointly together try and get to here. Does that sound like a stretch but doable? And you kind of partner with the client and say, let's set that as a target. And if we fail, we fail, but let's give it a good go, and we might have to extend the timeline. But the alternative is just to do nothing, which doesn't change anything. So it doesn't have to be overly complicated. Measure where you are, and then find out where you want to go. But partnering, it's a really interesting conversation for partnering with the client, rather than saying, you must, you will, you must, this many by this date. It's a complete paradigm shift, talking about this stuff, and the climate stuff. It levels the playing field. So for suppliers who are good at this, it levels the playing field with organisations like us. We're their client. And so you end up, it equalises a lot of these conversations. So that's how the data comes in. Fast forward now, we've got systems that we can press a button and see the complete female spend in Argentina or Tokyo, Japan or Australia. I mean, now we've been doing it a while, the data's all there. But it could be a spreadsheet. They don't have to overthink it.
That is just so exciting, because the amount of money spent by different demographics, actually, it is phenomenal. So when organisations are still thinking, hey, diversity is the side of the desk piece, actually, it absolutely does drive. I know we often, I mean, I've done it myself, quote McKinsey and say, hey, it's, diversity equals more, more profitable business and such. But actually, when you really start to boil it down into numbers, figures, the amount of spend that's going into these communities, why would we not want to then represent the communities in which we serve, and really start to switch out some of our supply base, basically. Yeah. So questions around how. We've talked a lot about large organisations, the blue chip organisations, many of which are here today, but smaller organisations that are, say, female minority owned, or social enterprises. How do you find these organisations in order to connect them in with large organisations? Because a lot of diversity is about the systematic barriers that we experience, the breaks in the system.
Yeah, that's a good question. And how do they get found? Mm-hmm. How do we find them, and how do they get found? There are organisations, so a couple to name check, and these are nearly free or very cost effective for the suppliers. I'm talking about a couple of £100 to join, if that. WeConnect International is one to know if you don't already know it. That is the international network of female-owned businesses. And I think it's £200 to join if you're a supplier. For a big organisation, it's 25, 30 grand. And that's right, isn't it? Because the big organisations can afford it. And that is a network. So if you want to find female-owned suppliers across the sectors, this is multi-sector, you know, like manufacturing or IT, technology, you know, the whole gamut. You can, once you're a member of it as a big organisation, you filter by what you're looking for, what type of company it is, which region it's in, and it will just present you the answers. And you can then contact those companies directly. If you're on the other side as the supplier, you should join WeConnect as a female-owned business, and then you could get found. There's a similar organisation called Social Enterprise UK, and as the name suggests, they're the same network but for social enterprises. There's a black network with Saatchi have done some great work with, which is called the Black Business Network. The only issue with all of these is some of them are a bit local. So Social Enterprise UK is, as the name suggests, just UK. If you want one in the Netherlands or Germany, where do you go? There's not an obvious place to go. So we need more of those almost like matchmaking services, if you like, for the businesses. On top of that, they don't just allow the business to get fined, they allow networking, they allow best practice, you know, they share and try and help these businesses prepare for pitching to a bigger company. So they don't just help with the connection. So those kind of organisations, you know, you have to, if you're serious, you have to join. And so we've joined the ones we think we need to join, but there's lots of countries to do this in. But WeConnect is definitely a star for the female-owned businesses.
Mm-hmm. And so there's the global level, there is the local level, there's a number of different chapters and territories, but really, wherever you are, 10 minutes to go. Oh my goodness, the time always goes so quickly, doesn't it? I must ask a couple of these questions here, because I've got a number of cards from people that had to leave who did want to ask a number of questions. But quickly, please do tell me a little bit about the programme, actually. I knew that was a question that I wanted to get in there about the programme, and then let's go into some of the questions from the floor, and we would just really love to hear either any questions or any personal stories, actually, as well, because you can see across the board from supply chain right the way through to employee networks, right up the way to the board and the C-suite. Diversity, inclusion, belonging, equity is relevant.
Well, the programme you're talking about, we've called it the SPF, which is the Sustainable Procurement Framework, but don't let that put you off as a name. Basically, we are a supplier to our clients and we get audited to death. And that's fine because we've got people who can do this, but if you're a small business, it's probably the salesman or the HR person who's got to find time to answer hundreds of questions about various things. And it's called audit fatigue. You get fed up doing it and you have to answer the same questions over and over again. And there are great organisations who do this and they fill a need, they reduce risk, they allow big organisations to make sure things are happening as they should, such as EcoVadis and SEDEX, and these organisations are needed. But we wanted to do something different, so we created our own more empathetic, more friendly, more uplifting, more positive programme to do just that. And we basically said the suppliers don't have to do anything, they don't have to pay any money, they just need to have a username and a password, log into our platform where we will say where we think you are on your ESG and sustainability journey. And we don't rate them, we say we think your level of maturity is here and we'd like to help you get to there in your time. And so instead of beginner, we say you're emerging. And if you're getting better, you're evolving. And if you're getting policies and targets, you're now embedded. So it's trying to be positive and help suppliers understand, A, why sustainability and diversity are important, because these companies, some of them are just trying to stay alive. You know, never mind sit there and strategize, they just want to be here next year. So let's be honest. So if we can do and help them by saying, we've rated you, we think you're here, we think you can get to here. Here is some boilerplate policy documents. Here's some videos. Here's some learning. Here are some of our partners, including Dial Global, that we can pass you across to learn more about. And nearly all of this is costing them nothing at all. And then the idea is that they each progress. If every supplier could progress 1% a year, think of the impact of 8,000 suppliers. I mean, that's what good business looks like. And it's been met with a bit of scepticism to start with. What are they after? What are they trying to do? Where's the hidden catch? Where's the fee? There is no fee. What are these UN goals things? Oh, actually, I'm better than I thought I was. Oh, yeah, we've got a lady on the board. Oh, we've got a diverse programme. We do community work. And they realise that by answering a few questions, learning a little bit more, they can actually move up the levels. And then we want to hand them off to other people who are smarter than us. And that will grow their business, it will help them in their relationship with us, and our clients absolutely love it because they're not having to lift a finger and they get all the benefit. So we're trying to roll it out really fast. We'll have 30% of our global spend coming through suppliers on this platform by March. We want 100%, obviously, but it's all about impact and helping give a leg up to companies who maybe aren't where they could be, just for no fault of their own. They're just smaller businesses. And share what we've learned with some of our colleagues as well. BSI have been partners with us on it, British Standards Institute have helped with some of the framework. So we're quite excited about it because it's that ripple effect. As a big organisation, if you do good, it ripples out through your partners. I mean, it's magical, isn't it?
It absolutely is. It is so magical. And I love that you use the word there, evolution, because it is a life cycle evolution of maturity when it comes to all of these different aspects. A couple of decisions at the top can lead to huge positive repercussions all the way through the supply chain. Real, big businesses can have such a positive, profound impact on the community when they're taking initiatives like this seriously.
Coming home from work, knowing that you've been involved in a program like that, I mean, who's not going to like it? And if you're the supplier, we encourage them to talk to their suppliers, so you keep the wave going. Talk to your own suppliers about this.
Quick other question, how do you break through any adversity? Because obviously we all know that diversity initiatives are most effective when they start at the top, when we have CEO buy-in and it literally is then a ripple effect. Talk to us about how...
You want the tricks of the trade here, don't you? So with our executive board, if you couch the request with, and the client said, that's a home run. So you need to kind of get to the client to sort of say, yeah, this would be a good idea, wouldn't it? Actually, I'll take that to the board, see if they're interested in doing that. Well, Diageo said, or Unilever said, wouldn't it be great? That's one method I've used quite well. Hopefully I'm persuasive, but not always. The other way is, we've got those targets. We've got targets like a lot of businesses in the room have got around carbon reduction, around diversity, around the makeup of our business, around, all of those things. Once you've got a target, you then can use that as almost as a lever to say, well, we're not doing so well on this one. We need to be doing more of this, otherwise we're not going to hit our target and our target date. And that, people don't want to fail on their targets. Businesses are quite good at trying to hit a target, aren't they? Normally financial, but the same kind of thinking happens with other targets. So having a client in your back pocket helping you is great. Hopefully being persuasive and putting a good case together, but also having some targets. If you haven't got any targets, set some. Just start with some simple ones. 5% diverse supply chain spend. Can you do it? Don't know. You don't know. You don't try, do you? Maybe you get 3. It's better than 0. Don't overthink it. Yeah. I mean, the mission and the values of your organisation, which is a great one, by the way, so hats off to you, that's got to be your friend. I mean, when you're talking to partners, when you're fundraising or talking to suppliers, I think it's really powerful to say this is the vision we have. If we want to work together, you need to be somewhat aligned to that. That's powerful, and living and breathing those values, obviously, in the way you interact with them. So, not in your day-to-day conversations, but also in contracts and in engagement, and in the way, Layla and I have talked before about things like payment terms. You have to kind of change the way you deal with certain types of businesses, smaller businesses, diverse businesses, startups, charity partners. You can't say, as some organisations do, it's 120 days. It's not going to work. They won't be here in 120 days. So you have to think differently and apply the same kind of principles, but to a smaller business that's in a different position. But it's about empathy. It's about trying to be a good partner, a good business. Someone said earlier, I think it was the lady from Britvic, be kind. You can do it in business. You get good outcomes from it. You might not be seen as the hard-nosed person, but be a nice business. Live your values. Talk to them. Weave them into every contract, every communication with partners. I always say something like, people don't want to come to work and do bad stuff, do they? If they do, they're a bit weird. But you don't. You want to work for an organisation that feels like it's a good organisation. You buy into what they're doing. You want to be a good person. You want to do good work. And that goes for small businesses, charities, conglomerates. And so once you boil it down, we should be able to do good stuff together, shouldn't we? Just figure it out. Cut through some of the red tape stuff.